Recording in progress. Very good. Okay, so I want to welcome everybody to Trees, the first 5 years. Thank you for answering the poll questions at the beginning. As I said, this webinar is being recorded. And so the great news is that you will receive a link, an email actually from Zoom in 2 days after this webinar that's going to have this link that's on your screen, as well as, and the recording's going to be there, and we have 2 handouts for you that we'll be talking about today. So as you see this little hand here in the bottom right-hand corner, if you see that on a slide, that's going to let you know that you are, that this information is going to be on that handout for you, okay? So we are also going to be asking you to enter questions into the chat because at the very end, we're going to have time to answer those questions for you. So just enter them into the chat for us and we'll remind you a couple of times. Let's see, what else? We do have cameras and microphones off, as you might have noticed. And I think now it's going to be my pleasure to once again thank everybody for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to Karen Wilhelm.
Hey everyone, welcome. We're so excited to present the first 5 years of Trees. And as Cheryl had mentioned, we have people across the state joining us today for this webinar and across our nation. So welcome everybody. And I'm really excited because, you know, when we think of trees, trees bring a great value to our community. And I like to think of your tree as our tree, because when happy trees are healthy and beautiful, they reduce the ambiance temperature around our homes, they bring curb appeal, and they increase the value of our communities. And they're just nice to sit under and enjoy a picnic. So welcome everybody. We do have lots of programs available across the state. So if you're a California American Water customer, we have residential WaterWise house call for outdoor sprinkler checkups. We could do phone consultations. We have free outdoor and indoor water saving devices and rebates available. So check with each local office across the state. We have Monterey, LA, Ventura, San Diego, and a few other districts that have just joined our team. So if you would like to have more information about this product or service we provide, you can contact me directly and I'll put my number in the chat, or you can grab the phone numbers at the end of the presentation for each district or at CaliforniaAmericanWater.com website. If you are not a California American Water customer, lots of agencies out there have programs available to you, and you can check with them directly to see what they can offer. I don't want to take any more time up, so let's get to this great presentation, and I'm going to hand it back over to our team, Cheryl and Marcia. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karen. Thank you. Yeah, so Cheryl Buckwalter, the name of my company is Landscape Liaisons, and I'm always thrilled to be able to work with California American Water and to provide these educational programs, because that's what I do: residential landscape design, education, and consultations. And I love everything water-wise, environmentally responsible, and I have been studying and practicing this since about 2002. So let me now turn it over to Marcia.
Hi, I'm Marcia Scott, and I'm a landscape designer, but for this presentation and all of the time, I'm a certified arborist. And I love that all you guys are here to learn about trees. Trees are just a wonderful thing, my favorite.
And I also want to give a shout out and a big thank you to Soleil Tranquilli. While she is not here today with us, she really played a huge role in helping us put this webinar together. And I'll give her the credit for all the dancing animation that you'll be seeing coming up here in just a moment. She has a great sense of humor. So Marcia?
Well, hello. First, let me explain my passion. Trees really are amazing. They provide beauty, a sense of place, shade and wind protection, wildlife value, They sequester carbon, they clean the air, and I could go on and on. There are so many other benefits you can't even imagine. And for us here in California, they provide the obvious: shade, shade, more shade, and cooling. So if trees are so amazing, why don't we make sure to plant them at every opportunity? Here's a street with no trees on either side. Those poor west-facing homes, no relief. Yikes, this really is a death zone. The heat from the sun just radiates off that concrete and asphalt. This neighborhood street will be 10 to 15 degrees hotter in summer without shade, and that will be all day. They are missed opportunities for cooling and reducing the heat. Let's rethink this scenario. Trees could bring some relief. Trees could make this street more hospitable to all life. Trees would catch that intense sunshine and cool that street down. Don't be afraid of planting some future or even some present tree benefits. Trees are not things to be feared, okay? Big trees are not scary things, but instead spirits, they're spirits that can be enjoyed and looked forward to. Now, Cheryl's going to teach us how to make some smart tree choices.
Great, thank you. Yes, and here are the things that we will be covering today. We're going to help you learn how to choose a successful tree. What does that mean? And then how to plant your young tree, and also how to care for your young tree, because it's very important that we learn how to water them, smart watering, efficient watering, as well as effective pruning strategies. So, I think we all want our trees to grow from young up to adulthood, right? So let's figure out how to do that. I'd like to talk a little bit more about trees and the fact that they provide so much to us. Marcia spoke about her passion for trees. I am passionate as well. I like doing the theme jewelry with all my trees and everything, but let's dive into this just a little bit further. So trees, as you can imagine, they really work for us. As you can see on the slide here, and there's that little hand for the handout, but they give us so much. This handout will give you a checklist of questions to answer to figure out what kinds of trees you need. Do you need shade for your house, your driveway, the parking lot, a tall building or something? How about edible? Do you want your trees to provide you with food, flowers, medicinal uses? Like think about an aloe plant, but there are trees that provide medicinal uses as well. Screening, are you on a noisy corner or something and you need to screen or camouflage some of that loud noise? And how about growth? Do you need a tree that can stand for generations, which we hope, but sometimes we need them smaller, larger, growing faster, and so forth. And then habitat, which is so important because trees provide food, shelter, places for birds and other garden life to raise their young. We want those pollinators and all. And so we really need to think about habitat for our trees, and especially California native trees that support California native life. So I'm just going to show you a few quick examples of trees that are really good for California. On your handout, there are lists or links to find other lists for trees that are good for your area too. On the left, we have a Deodor Cedar. The reason I like to point this one out is because it's a good substitute for coast redwoods. Here in the Sacramento region, we have a lot of coast redwoods and they belong on the coast. So this is a good substitute. Also on the right is the Desert Museum Pali Verde. And it's really nice because you can see how the light just dapples, the sunlight dapples through the branches onto the sidewalk. On the left here, we have a Chinese pistache, which is really pretty and gives a lot of fall color. And on the right is an olive that's been left over from an orchard. And of course, trees give us beauty. On the left is a native California tree, the Western redbud, when it's in bloom. And then on the right is one of Sulei's favorites. It's called Bubba. It's a desert willow, and it's just a gorgeous tree. On the left here, we have a Catalina cherry. And don't let this fool you. This tree can get to be 40 feet tall, but it's got wonderful fruit that's really enjoyed by birds a lot. On the right, we have our valley oak. So as you can see, this is a really mature oak and all the wonderful shade that it provides. So let's also think about the right plant in the right place, right? Because trees are truly our allies. They last for generations, as I was saying. Some can even outlast us by a century or more. So worthy of thought and care for sure, because trees they create just a great legacy. So let's plant more trees. Here are those coast redwoods. Oh my goodness. On the left, we can see they're at the corner. They were blocking a stop sign. And on the right, we've got these redwoods that are huge in this house, and their roots are all under the sidewalk, the entry walk, the driveway. So what do you think? You know, are these the right trees for this corner or for this home? You know, they interfere with the line of sight in the driveway as well as at the corner. So I think they're a safety hazard. And as you can see on the left, they're near those electrical lines as well. So trees and our job, we see what trees do for us. We need to do for trees as well. So what do I need to provide for trees to help them be successful? I need to think about that size, put them in the right plant, in the right place for their size and shape. You know, do we need a tree that is evergreen or deciduous? Evergreen keeps their leaves year round, but they also drop some things year round. Deciduous trees drop their leaves all at once generally. And then, you know, what are our conditions? Full sun, part shade? Are we in a real windy area? Is the tree going to be near a building or my home that really has reflected heat coming off of it? And then there's that abuse, you know, are they going to be around pets that are helping to water them, so to speak? And, you know, and what about maintenance equipment and that sort of thing? Vandalism, soil. Where will this tree live? Okay. How are the soil conditions? Look around your neighborhood, around your community, and see which trees are really doing well and which ones are struggling. Those are going to be some good signs for you. And then water. Water. That's really, really important. We need to have a good understanding of what the tree's water needs are. Is it a low water use, moderate water use, or whatever? Our handouts, again, give you some great resources for how, for trees and what the various species water needs are. And then think about how you're going to irrigate them. Do you have an irrigation system? Are you going to water them by hand or what? So we want to think about what the tree's needs are when they're young and when they're mature. So speaking of evergreen and deciduous trees, on the left is a beautiful crepe myrtle. On the right is a crepe myrtle after its leaves have dropped. And so we want to keep in mind with crepe myrtles, please, do not top them. Unfortunately, this is one of the trees that get lopped off more than any other tree, I think. And Marcia can certainly speak to this better than I, but you'll see that they just get chopped off, and trees are not supposed to be topped. So here are just a few of the resources that are going to be on your list. And, you know, you can go there just like at the bottom here, the Urban Tree Foundation, a great statewide organization to find out what trees might be best for your area and your conditions. For the many resources here. So just a quick reminder, enter your questions into the chat, please, and then we will answer them at the end. Thank you.
Well, so Cheryl's given us a few tips on how to choose the right type of tree for what you want. Now to go shopping. To find a healthy tree, primarily, we look at the roots. And how do we do that? Well, it's kind of hard, even for me. But even before you look up, you should look at the base of the tree, at the roots. That's right, in the nursery, you should look at the bottom. Trees are all about roots, so problems with the roots may equal problems with the tree later. Here are some tree root problems that are detectable in containers. The middle photo shows those twisty roots have bad structure, and that's usually caused from no root corrections at the nursery when they're real tiny babies. Those twisty roots may eventually stunt or kill the tree. The side photos indicate surfacing roots. Those tiny, tiny fiber-like roots indicate a problem. In young trees, this is caused by burying the tree too deeply sometimes. Those small roots are not important to the tree, okay? Don't worry about, we gotta keep all the roots. The tree's just gonna cope just fine if you get rid of some. Those little roots could lead to failure from girdling at about the 10-year point in the tree's life. You could have this tree in your yard for 10 years and then it gets girdled and dies on you. You may correct these root problems with root pruning, or you can choose a healthier tree to just start with. And I advise that you do that. Other things to watch out for, you want to see a root or a trunk flare. That's going to indicate that this tree was buried too deeply. So all trees have trunk flares. If you don't see one, it was probably buried too deeply. Besides being bad in itself, it indicates poor nursery practices. The tree could have other problems. If they buried that thing too deeply, what else did they do to it? Then in the middle, burlap is not inherently a bad thing, but remove burlap from around the tree collar. It can promote crown rot. And the last one on the right, with a trunk wound, that is not the one to buy. Look for bark wounds or other on potential purchases. They're not always a bad thing, but they can indicate, again, other problematic issues. So here are some fine looking trees. Look at, we're not even looking at the top. We're just looking at the bases. Healthy looking roots. They can have all kinds of different looks. Flaky bark, knobby grafts, small green shoots, bent trunks. But see, it's all about the roots. Right down there at the soil level, these all look good. When I saw all these guys at the nursery, they look good. So here's showing you some can sizes. Is container size important? Well, on the left is a 5-gallon. Then next to that is a 15-gallon pot. And on the far right is a 24-inch box. The one on the far left is a desert willow with the little pink flower. And the other two are Palo Verde trees that do really well around here. You need to know that bigger is not better in containerized plants, any containerized plants. Usually the smaller guys thrive better and have less root issues. And a final word, okay, if you don't find a healthy tree the day you go shopping, I know this is so hard. If you don't find a healthy tree, it's a wise decision to wait until there's a better tree. Go another day. Trees do best if they're healthy at the start. Now you got your tree, and now it's planting day. And when is planting day? The best time of the year in California are the months that are the farthest away from the summer heat. So late fall and winter are the best times here. You don't want to plant when it's too wet. Like every once in a while, we actually get rain in California. So you don't want to plant when the soil is too soggy. When you're planting, you want to dig a nice wide hole, not to China, not deep, wider holes, not deeper. And plant it grade or even a little bit high. Burying that soil trunk interface can lead to tree death. We just learned that in the chopping. Yes, it really can lead to tree death. Remember that. Check, and then you check your backfill is 100% existing soil. Don't add anything different to it. If you need to improve the soil, do so by putting compost over a larger planting area. Don't try to add extra compost to the backfill of your tree planting. Don't add a different soil to the backfill because the difference takes in water differently. You want this thing to really access water well. And finally, if you're hand watering, create a berm around the tree that can be knocked down in the winter. And then our tree is all set. We planted it. And during this whole process, I want you to water, and then water some more. Before you plant it, you water the container. During the planting, you water the backfill as you stack it up in there inside the hole. And after the planting, you trickle water it nice and slowly so that the roots and everything totally get water. And then after that, staking your young tree can be essential. First, you remove that central stake that you include at the nursery. Gosh, how many trees have we seen? That little middle stake is still there. Well, that guy can really wound the bark. And wounding the bark of a tree is like wounding your own skin. You need to get rid of that stake. There are lots of different ways to effectively stake a tree. For this staking system that I'm showing in this little illustration here, you need 2 stakes. They could be lodge poles, T-posts, pipe, rebar, bamboo stakes. You get the picture. Your goal here is not to make the tree rigid, but to protect it from snapping off in high winds and from physical outside damage like kids, cars, even deer antlers, all kinds of that stuff. You want the tree to be able to move a little bit so it can get strong. So you're going to use flexible ties. You can even use something like pantyhose. Some people still have those in their drawers. Pantyhose make great tree ties, actually. And then the stakes are temporary. This is really, really super important. The stakes are temporary. Remove them when the tree is rooted in and stable. Usually that's in a year or definitely by 2 years. You can check by taking it off, removing the ties from the stake, wiggling the tree a little bit. And if those roots heave up a little, that thing's not ready to come off the stakes. But usually within a year or 2, they're going to be pretty good. Now, Cheryl will teach you how to make your soil healthy. Cheryl?
Thank you. I was muted. So thank you very much. Yeah, because watering, and we've talked a little bit about watering. We're going to talk a little bit more about it, but it starts with the soil. It starts at the ground, caring for your soil, and then your soil will care for your tree. So let's start with the compost first. To nurture our soil, we want 1 inch of compost on top of the soil. And it really has many, many long-term benefits. And this is really, I like this term, lazy gardener. That's one of Soule's terms. I call it a smart gardener, but a lazy gardener, you use 1 inch of compost and it will do so much for you. The root systems just thrive in soils that have had compost added. And then over time, it improves the soil. So it becomes like this wonderful sponge that's rich with nutrients. And it also can have more, it holds water better as well. So healthy trees really can be much more resilient to the harsh conditions that we are experiencing and will continue to experience in the future, unfortunately, droughts and longer dry periods and so forth. So compost first, then mulch. 4 inches. You might read or see sometimes 3 to 4 inches. The main thing is you want mulch. Okay, so that's lazy gardener strategy number 2. It really is your friend and ally. It helps to protect the roots from heat and cold and wind conditions, moderates the soil temperature, which is really good for the soil organisms as well. I already mentioned how it helps to hold moisture with compost, but the mulch does that as well. And then that mulch is just right on top of the compost. Now here is a drawing, if you will, of a tree. So we're just showing at the top. Here is our mulch. It's right on top here. And do you notice this red line, this bracket right here? That's showing that we want the mulch not to be in touch with the base of the tree, the trunk. It needs to be 6 to 8 inches away. And the objective is that that way there can be more air movement, but also when mulch is up against a tree and it's not the native mulch or, you know, like tree leaf drop and that sort of thing out in nature, but it's mulch that we've added and it's organic. We don't want it to harbor pests and organisms and create disease problems. Then right under that mulch, we have 1 inch of compost, and then that's right on top of the soil that you see here. And it's really great. We want that native soil. So we want to be sure that we have all 3 of these elements in our soil recipe. And as you'll see here, we actually will show you in a second how there's more roots right under the surface, but you'll see that in just a moment. Now let's move on to more about watering your tree. What this slide is showing you are these are drip lines, and they're in what's called a grid pattern. And where you see these little circles of water, there's an emitter that's built right into that line. And what's wonderful is as the water stays on for the scheduled period of time, those circles will start to connect with each other. And this area becomes moistened soil because roots are going to grow where there is moistened soil. You might be thinking, oh my gosh, that's a lot of moist soil, but you're watering very, very efficiently. You're encouraging roots to go there. So this is what I was speaking to. Another handout for us. That's great. And that's because there's some great resources on the handouts for how to figure out how much water your trees need, how much to water them, and when, and so forth. But in the top 18 inches of soil or so, 90% of your roots exist, but you can help your trees get established and really have deeper, deeper roots and become more climate resilient and drought tolerant. So I'd like to add here that what we have is that the Sacramento Tree Foundation is one of our wonderful resources here. And of course, we have others throughout the state, as we've already said, like the Urban Tree Foundation and so forth. But Sac Tree says for first year, water that tree 2 to 3 times a week, slowly, and apply about 5 gallons. The second year, 1 time a week, 10 gallons. These are rules of thumb based on your conditions. And as you can see, it takes 3 years. We're looking now at 3 years for every other week, about 15 gallons, because it can take between 3 to 5 years for trees to get established. So once we know about that, how do we know how deep the soil, the water's going into the soil? Well, we can check by doing what's called this slot method. And so on the left-hand side, you just stick in a trowel or a shovel, you pull back the soil, and you put your hand in there to really get in touch with the soil. And so what you're going to find is if the soil is dry, then it will feel either warm or maybe kind of crumbly. And if it's moist, it's going to feel slightly cool to your touch. So get in touch with the soil. Another way on the right-hand side, this is what's called a soil probe or auger. You just press it down into the soil, twist it, pull it up. And as you can see, there's darker soil on the top, which means that's probably more moist. And down deeper, it's a different color and drier. So if these are our roots all the way down here, that tells me I need to water some more. And this is an example of our soil. We were saying how important soil is, but soil isn't just one thing. It's not just sandy, it's not just clay, it's not just silt, it's a mixture. And what that mixture is affects how water moves into and through our soil. So as you can see on the left, the sandy soil goes down in more of a column, and look how fast it soaks in, 15 minutes down to 12 inches. On the right's the soil that's more clayey. It's got more clay in it than the sand and silt. That moves down more slowly and spreads out. So it's really important to keep this in mind when we're watering. Other watering tips for our trees. So on the left here, you can see this is a baby tree. It's a new tree. In the middle, the X is the trunk of the tree. And then you can see about halfway between the trunk and outer to the edge of this small tree, that's where we've placed these emitters. As the tree gets larger, we can put another tube in here and then put another ring. And that's what it's showing on the right-hand side. If we started with a young tree, then we expand these rings out to the drip line of the tree. So on the left is just an example of a fake tree. It's a display tree that we use at workshops to show the rings. On the right, they're kind of faint, but you can see there's 2 rings around these trees. Here's another example of that grid. layout of the emitter line, which is perfectly fine for trees as well. And what I wanted to point out, though, how important it is when you first put a tree in or a plant, you want to be sure to have an emitter. You know, you've got your root ball and your soil from the can. You want to be sure to have one emitter on that soil because that soil is different than what's in your landscape. And so having an emitter here and then more out here, you're going to ensure that your tree is going to get the water that it needs. And oh my gosh, overspray. Okay. So we want to water the target, right? We want to water our lawn. We want to water the soil, not the trunk of the tree, as you can see here, because this just causes all kinds of pest problems. Think about the target, the sprinklers, the water getting to the soil and not on the tree. And on my soapbox for just another minute about overwatering and runoff, you know, the objective is to water that root zone where it's useful to the tree, not overwater it. Observe it. Turn on your sprinkler and see how long you can water before it starts to run off, and then water a little bit less time, because water going into the storm drains and into the gutters is just wasted water and it's not helping our trees. So here's another tip, and that would be to contact California American Water or your water provider to get a free, I emphasize free, water-wise survey of your landscape and your irrigation system. All right, enter those questions into the chat as a reminder, and then we will answer them at the end. Marcia.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about pruning, which is what so many people worry about that. But I want to just tell you, the most important pruning your tree can ever get is pruning when it is young. So some pruning that you don't want to do is like this. Don't do it like this. Oh my gosh, you can kill an older tree with pruning. Trees can accept a lot more pruning when they are young. I'll show you a few pruning tips that will help your young tree grow into a well-mannered old tree. On the left, the images show the small lower branches left on, and that we call that the skirt, as opposed to off. Preserve the lower branches on your young tree, even if you don't want or need them. You can remove them later when they're about 1 inch around. You can shorten them if you want. You can leave some leaves on there to help that tree grow. The tree trunk gets thicker much sooner if the skirt is left on a young tree, okay? There's a reason why you leave that skirt on. It helps the tree grow. The branches can be shortened, but left to at least 1 foot long. A strong trunk on a young tree leads to a strong tree. On the right are 2 different photos with Palo Verde trees. The first one, they've skirted that thing up. That tree is about 10 feet tall. It's terrible. It's a terrible buy. That 10-foot tree will need to be staked for quite a while, for several years, for probably 3 to 5 years. Its trunk is way too small for that head. To the right of that photo is a photo of some other Palo Verde trees in 5-gallon cans, and they have some really nice fancy skirts. They're ready to size up their trunks really fast. Trees know how to take care of themselves naturally. On the left is a wild native oak grown the way it needs to, sizing up its trunk and retaining those leaves, those food factories. They all photosynthesize and help that tree grow faster, and all this with no stakes. On the right, a native oak that is nursery grown. It will be fine, but will take a lot longer to grow, and it will need staking. They could have left the skirt on that tree, and they didn't. They cut it off, but now just leave it alone for a while. On your trees, cut the unwanted branches off before they get too large, though. About 1 inch to 1.5 inches around, so your cuts won't really leave too many wounds. We want our wounds to heal really quickly. And next, you want to prune your young tree for healthy structure. The strongest form for most trees is a central leader, the pink line. I like to say that a tree needs a boss. It needs a central leader. That doesn't mean there aren't lots of trees out there that don't have multiple bosses, leaders, but statistics show us that trunk and large branch failures, that means crashing down on your house or your car, are much more infrequent when young trees are trained to a central leader. It's a stronger form. Some branches will only need to be reduced, like you shorten them. And they don't need to be removed because remember, we want to save some of those food factories for the trees to help them grow faster. Next. Before your tree reaches 5 years old, you'll have to decide about which branches you'll keep. While the tree was a baby, it was fine to leave lots of branches, but now they're getting kind of big, looks kind of crowded in there. You want to look out for too many branches and not enough space. So on the left, with those little red arrows, it's showing all the young branches, and on the right, the yellow circles show you how big they're going to get. So when they're overlapping, they cannot attach well to the trunk. They don't attach at all, actually. So recipe for branch failure. So we've all seen branches that have ripped off during a storm. That's poor attachments are showing you they're the first guys to go. So when you're looking at your slightly, maybe adolescent tree, you want to check it out for not enough room on the branches. So one thing to know, to observe, is that branches do not move up or down on the tree. They don't, where they're placed is where they're going to stay forever and ever, even for 100 years. So you need to assess, is my branch going to get 8 inches around? Is it going to get 14 inches around? Is there enough room on that trunk for all that branch activity? You want to just check. You want to help it grow. So your new tree is a living thing and you have to nurture it. It has a good start, you chose it well, and then planted it so it can thrive. And by giving it the correct amount of water, frequently at first, but not too much, you let the soil dry out just a little bit between waterings. You helped it stay strong by pruning for good structure. Now you have to protect that baby, stake it to protect from the wind and the kids and the bikes and the cars and the deer. If you've started your young tree in a healthy way, now you can watch it mature. I'll just remind you of some problems that seem really tiny in a young tree, but can prevent your tree from reaching old age. So next, in the top picture with the yellow arrows, there's an example of girdling roots that will be an issue, even fatal later in the tree's life. Remember those earlier pictures on shopping day with the tiny, tiny roots we saw at the surface of those pots? Well, they can lead to this girdling. Girdling is like suffocating itself. The tree's roots grow right around the trunk and it suffocates it. At this point in time, if it is correctable, the photo with the yellow arrows, if it's correctable, you probably have to hire an arborist to have success in rescuing the tree, if it can be saved. You should just get a healthy tree to start with. Below with the green dashed lines, that's a leaner tree. There's nothing that can be done about that now, but if that tree was staked when it was young, it could be straight up and have less risk for failure, less risk for falling over. And then the far right picture with the red arrows, that's indicating sunburn damage to the bark. The primary way a tree keeps pathogens like rots out of a wound is to seal it up with bark. And when it's sunburned, it makes holes in the bark and all kinds of chances for decay and bugs to get in there. Prevention before this kind of sunburn happens is the only effective treatment. Hopefully, these young trees can heal their wounds before a pathogen gets in. So you can see that way back on shopping day, we could prevent these later issues by caring for a tree. The other way that sunburn can be prevented is by leaving the skirt on. It shades the tree root, the tree trunk. The sun can really kill bark on a young tree. This is older sunburn. Look at that tree's going to die. If it's not, no, it's not dead yet. And that stake is way beyond its past due date. What can I say? The poor tree outgrew its wrong spot. There's no way to make it safe now. The right tree for the right place will solve a lot of headaches in the future. And here, maybe they wanted to grow a duck when they used a one-cut solution for this tree. I don't know. And the palm trees, well, they grew a bit taller than originally intended, but they were probably pretty cute when they were young. Just realize what your tree is really going to turn into when you buy it. We want to grow a healthy urban forest that can take every condition this crazy climate can throw at it. Some of the trees here have been in this presentation. There's a Palo Verde, a desert willow, a redbud in this Central Valley landscape doing really well. This is a smart, water-conscious landscape with young trees that are creating an oasis for people, wildlife, and other plants on the stark open street. I'll give us a recap and then we'll get to chat questions. Now you know how to choose your type of tree that will be unique to your situation to be successful. And you know how to plant your young tree in healthy soil. You know to water your tree effectively and efficiently. And finally, you've learned a little bit on how to prune your young tree, because you want your tree to grow to be a proud adult tree, right? Now, Cheryl's going to show you how to access some of this great information we're giving you today.
Yeah, so thank you, Marcia. Just as a reminder, Zoom will send you a link in 2 days. And so you'll be able to go to the California American Water website to get the recording as well as the handouts. And I want to just share with you one last poll question. Give me just a moment, please. Dun, 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 dun. Here we go. Let's see if it's going to share it. Okay, it's not going to share it. So I'm just going to ask this question then. Give me just a second. All right, I'm just going to ask this question, and that is, enter it into the chat real quickly. When do you plan to plant a tree? Are you going to plant a tree this fall, for example? Are you going to plant 1 tree or 2 trees? What do you think? Yes, maybe, or no? Yes, maybe, or no? So if you'll enter your questions into the chat, that will be great. And then I am going to go ahead and start pulling up chat questions while you enter those. I'm just trying to get my little cursor back here. We had some very good questions in the beginning as well, so I'm going to go back there. And we do have a few questions that are coming into the Q&A, so I'll try to get to those as well. But if possible, entering into the chat helps me only have to look in one place, but I'll get to you, okay? So we had one from Anne, and this was regarding topping. So can you explain what you meant by trees aren't meant to be topped? If I have to control the height, for example, to prevent them from reaching power lines, is there another way to do so? Oh, Marcia, answer this for us.
Okay, well, a long time ago, it would have been great to choose a tree that wasn't going to grow that tall. So the only defense against all problems, pathogens, fungus problems, and bugs is the tree's bark. So when you top the tree, you're creating all these wounds, a lot of chances for problems, okay? So the new growth that comes out from topping a tree is not nearly as strong as the original growth. It's really better to not top a tree.
Okay.
I would suggest that you get an arborist to advise you on shortening that tree. Don't say top, shortening.
Yeah. Reducing the crown of it.
That's
okay.
right.
All right. Here's another question because we have them rolling in here. Please, we tried to plant an avocado once, but it did not do so well. We water a lot based on recommendation. Can you give some tips?
The problems with that might be specific to your site. Unfortunately, avocados are not the simplest, especially as baby trees. They're a little bit finicky. But if you're in an area where you can grow avocados, good for you. How nice. You can do it. You're just going to have to find some more local information about that tree.
I would suggest checking in with the UC Master Gardeners. They are located in every county throughout the state, actually throughout the country. And so check in with the UC Master Gardeners for that. All right, another one. How old should a tree be before putting it in the ground? If a tree is planted too early or a year or more late, will that impact how old the tree should be when the skirt is trimmed up or lower branches removed?
So I'm going to catch this one. You can put a tree that's, hey, trees are planted from acorns, right? They could just be weeks old. You just have to be able to stay on top of the watering for that tree and the protection. So the younger, the better, actually. And as far as the skirt goes, you know, by 5 years, you probably should have taken, remember when I said, take those skirt branches off if you don't want them eventually when they reach 1 inch to an inch and a half. And it varies for different tree species.
Okay, great. All right. Oh, this is good. Should you apply anything to a tree cut when you prune off a branch? No. It used to be that you would. They used to have all kinds of goops and stuff. You don't do that because what you want the tree to do is to, it can create a barrier and it doesn't heal necessarily. The term is called compartmentalization, but that's why if you look at a tree that's been pruned off of a trunk, excuse me, a branch that's been pruned off the trunk of a tree, and it's been curling over and it's nicely all the way around curling over, that tree is healing that wound, so to speak. Anything else to add to that, Marcia, before we go on?
Yeah, those tree tars, they actually trap more problems than they prevent. So you just leave the tree to callus over that wound itself. They've proven that's the healthiest thing to do. So if you go into a nursery and they're trying to sell you some tree seal, that's all snake oil stuff. Been long proven, 30 years proven.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. And we have answers to the last question that we asked about whether people are planning to plant trees this fall. So great. Yes, 4 in the fall, definitely in the fall, late fall. Okay, question. Planting trees to create shade can later compromise a rooftop solar system's efficiency. What tips do you have in this regard?
The tips I would have is, you know, if the solar panels came after the trees, okay, didn't know. You might have to remove them or open them up a little bit to the southwest sky, which is where you get the most sun. Otherwise, you choose the right tree for the right place, just like Cheryl taught you how to do. Use Select Tree is a great site up there to find out the height of the tree, the maximum height of that tree. Make sure you pay attention to that rather than just beauty or what you might want to feel you want.
Yes, and that's really good. And, you know, especially we're so aware of fire danger and wanting to protect our home from fires. So keep that in mind too, when there's a lot of good information at the resources we're providing for properly placing and spacing trees so that at maturity, the branches are not hanging over your rooftop. So someone said they may be planting because they might have a problem with really hard dirt. So yes, so it might be prudent to get what's called a soil analysis. You can go online and the UC Master Gardeners have lists of soil labs in our area, and they'll give you instructions for taking a soil sample, sending it in and finding out what's going on with your soil. What is the exact mix of sand, silt, and clay? And are there any nutrients that are needed? Because we don't want to just add fertilizers for the sake of adding fertilizers. It's a waste of money and often not the solution.
So I'd like to add to that one. Yeah. No time like the present to just put some arborist mulch free from tree companies, free. Yeah. Put a bunch over that soil.
And compost.
Just put the stuff out there. It's going to start improving your soil regardless of what you have. That's the very first thing. Just put something on there. Do not leave your soil bare.
Great. All right. My crepe myrtle was topped last year. What can I do to help it recover? Oh, thank you for that question.
Let it grow. Poor guy. Just let it grow.
Yeah. let it grow. And then as you were showing us on that one slide, Marcia, where there's a whole bunch of little branches, what happens with crepe myrtles is they get all this growth coming up. You could later just let it grow some and then selectively prune out some of those to give those branches more room. Would you say that's okay, Marcia?
Well, yeah, so cutting a little bit off of crepe myrtle, like 18 inches, not that big a deal. Well, cutting 18 feet is a big deal. So it's really hard to assess based on the short question.
Yeah. Okay. We are sharing this session. You will get a Zoom link in 2 days, and it will give you a link to go to the California American website. I just need to check time real quickly. Let's see. I planted an Asian pear tree about 8 years ago, but it attracted a lot of ants and they are eating into all of the fruit. What can I do?
There's stuff called tanglefoot, real sticky stuff, looks like petroleum jelly. And you put a ring of it around the trunk near the base, make sure none of the branches touch a fence or anything for a bridge for the ants. And you just can literally keep the ants out of the tree, but they're going into that tree for a reason, and usually it's not just the fruit. So you might want to check for other pests or pathogens or decay or something, that the reason those ants are going in there in the first place.
Yeah.
But tanglefoot is the first simple answer.
Okay, so we have 20 new messages here. And clearly we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but I'm going to keep rolling for a few more minutes, if that's okay with Karen and with our participants. And we'll answer as many as we can. And then we'll try to take a look at those questions and put some on the website for you. Okay, on the California American website. So when we talk about, let's see, I have apricot, peach, and nectarine trees between 2 and 10 years old. They are on one watering line. How much watering, days and gallons, would you recommend for them? I think there's going to be some resources, Marcia, right?
Yeah, and actually also, if you're in California, the UCANR has a great home orchard site to tell you how much to water your fruit trees. So I'd recommend you look at that site for fruit trees, because it's really different for fruit trees. If you want really big fruit, you got to water them a lot, actually.
Yeah,
more than an ornamental tree.
Yes, and they should be on their own zone, grouped together, because they're going to have their own water needs, and their own zone meaning in the irrigation system.
Correct. So all 3 of those trees need similar amounts of water, but they're not similar to other trees you might have.
Yeah. So one quick question here, and then I'm going to jump to the Q&A section, because some people have answered questions in the Q&A too. And it was just a quick one about the skirt branch size to prune off. Is that 1 inch measurement a diameter or circumference?
It is a diameter.
Okay. All right.
So basically it's between 1 and say 2 inches or 3 inches. Basically, it's a wound. You're trying to not make a big wound. So, and you wanted to try to be able to heal in 1 or 2 years, because all that tree's only defense is to close that wound up. So if it's a really fast growing tree, it'll do that really quickly. And if it's a really slow growing tree, it will take longer, that healing process.
Okay. Let's see. Squirrels plant acorns all through this yard. Can they dig the baby trees up, pot them, and give them to tree planters or join a tree planting group?
It depends on the tree. So it's really hard to do that with trees like with a lot of California native trees, because they have really deep tap roots to start with.
Yes.
It's better to just plant the acorns yourself and start in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And this mulch question, what do you think about organic mulch like oak leaves, grass trimmings? Is that okay, or better to get store-bought?
Well, for trees, stuff that came from trees is the best. If it's tree leaves or tree bark or tree wood, whatever that is. But yeah, it's just fine to use your own resources. That's a wonderful thing to do. Mulch is just great. I'll just encourage you to use mulch, whatever you have, use it.
Great. And a question about a 2-year-old Chinese pistache leader growing like a weed straight up. And they want no more height, but to spread out.
That's what a pistache seedling, that's what it does. It's really hard to have faith, but it will actually start to, it'll have that straight whip. And then one of these days, so pistaches are really young trees. I mean, they don't size up very fast at all. But if you have a little faith, it'll start turning into a more tree-like structure. It's just a baby still. Don't whack the top off of that thing.
And I think there's the Arbor Day Foundation. There's a lot of great information there for pruning trees, as well as treesaregood.org, which is by the International Society of Arboriculture. 2 quick questions from the Q&A, and then I'm going to go back to the chat for a minute before we close out, okay? Let's see. Oh, will there be more webinars in the future? So that was one question at the beginning. We wanted to know if you all were interested in a hands-on webinar about irrigation and watering trees. Of course, that will be when it is safe again for us to do in-person webinars. But Karen, do you want to speak to that?
You're muted, Karen, if you do want to speak to that.
Yeah, in-person webinars, hopefully we'll have those available. Due to our conditions right now, we're holding off on that, but hopefully maybe after the first of the year. And if you are interested in it, please let us know so that we can make something available. And if not, the conditions haven't gotten better, we can at least substitute something so that we can continue to get that information to you.
And I thank you. And I saw that somebody had raised their hand, but I'm not seeing the hand now. So if you have a question, please enter it in the chat. And I think we're actually getting close to taking care of and answering these questions. Couple more. Oh, Bob had raised his hand. Can you enter it into the chat for me, Bob? Thank you. Let's see. Oh, where do I find a tree specialist?
I don't really know what you mean by tree specialist.
Like an arborist?
If you want to find an arborist, you can go to ISA has directories. That's the International Society of Arboriculture. It's very easy to locate them online. And they'll have directories for the particular area you're looking for.
Oh,
so
good.
they're all
Good. And make sure if you're wanting an arborist that they are certified, that they are a certified arborist. Okay. Let's see, just 2 more questions, I think, and then we'll close it out. It looks like I have to replace a dying, very small tree. Looks like a Christmas tree that's about 8 feet tall. One side has no greenery, etc. Can it be saved? No greenery for a couple of years. Can I plant something similar in the same place? If yes, how do I deal with existing roots?
So it depends on the type of tree that it is, actually. Some trees, it'll come back, no problem. Some trees, nope, get rid of that sucker. As far as the roots, usually not a huge problem unless you had some kind of root pathogen. So that's kind of impossible to assess just from a question.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can have somebody visit that knows a little more about trees.
Okay. And lastly, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Especially to identify what it is, what type of trees it is. It's really important, actually, the type of tree, because different trees get different problems.
Right. Okay. And lastly, what are your thoughts on using stone like pea gravel instead of wood mulch? I heard they are good for controlling weeds, but do they retain too much heat, which might cause problems? Good question.
Yeah, right. Do you want to answer that, Cheryl?
Go ahead, because I'm going to move on to the next slide,
Okay,
so we can close out.
So the stone mulches, they have to be thick enough to suppress weeds. They have to be so thick that they keep sunlight from hitting the soil. So usually most people with stone mulches don't put them thick enough. And also, yes, they're very hot. They reflect a lot of heat. And the worst thing I think about them is that they do not improve the soil at all. So they're not really helping out your soil, and your soil grows your plants. We now have to use stone mulches a short distance from the house for fire prevention. But as soon as you can use wood mulches, that's a better option.
Very good. I would not be able to add to that. That was great, Marcia. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us today. Karen, would you like to add anything at the end before I stop the recording?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you for such a great presentation. You both are a wealth of knowledge, and I am glad that you were able to share that knowledge with our customers and our communities across the state and elsewhere. Just a reminder, my name is Karen. I'm with California American Water. I am one of the conservation representatives here. We have multiple service districts across the state. I can help you get to that person if needed, or you can go to our website at amwater.com and go under conservation to find out all about the incentive programs we have available. We have multiple free devices available for indoor, outdoor. We have rebates available. We are, we help our customers for the residential, multifamily, and commercial. So check it out. And again, if you're not a California American Water customer, make sure you check your own water agency webpage, and they'll most likely have some type of a program available to you. And again, thank you to Marcia and Cheryl for a wonderful presentation on trees. It was good. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Karen, and everybody else for for us being able to provide this workshop on trees, and for you guys attending them. Good for you. Trees are wonderful.
Yeah. All right. Goodbye for now. Take care, everybody.